Daniel Kelly wiped sweat from his forehead as he crouched in the thick Amazon undergrowth. The heat pressed down on him like a heavy blanket. His eyes followed tracks in the mud, signs of rare jaguars he had been studying for the past 3 weeks. As a wildlife conservationist with a military background, Daniel felt at home in these wild places far from civilization. He had left his violent past behind 8 years ago. 15 years in special forces had taught him skills most people would never need. Now he used those skills to track and protect endangered animals instead of hunting men. The transition made sense to him. Both jobs required patience, careful observation, and the ability to survive in harsh conditions. Daniel checked his small satellite phone. No signal again. He was truly alone out here, and that was how he liked it. People were complicated. Animals made sense. They followed patterns and instincts. They didn't lie or betray. The birds suddenly went quiet. Daniel froze, his body tensing. In the jungle, silence meant danger. He scanned the trees looking for movement. Nothing. But the hairs on his arms stood up. Something was wrong. A bright blue light cut through the dense canopy above. It started as a small dot, then expanded into a circle 30 feet wide. Daniel reached for his knife, the only weapon he carried these days. The light grew brighter, hurting his eyes. He tried to run, but his legs wouldn't move. "What the hell?" he whispered as his body rose from the ground. The blue light surrounded him completely. His vision blurred. His mind screamed to fight, but his muscles wouldn't respond. The jungle disappeared below him as he floated upward, into something massive hidden above the clouds. Then everything went black. Daniel woke with a pounding headache. He lay on a cold metal floor in a room with smooth, shiny walls. One wall was clear like glass. Beyond it, he saw a corridor with more glass walls showing different environments: desert, tundra, ocean. He stood up slowly, testing his limbs. Everything worked, but his movements felt sluggish. The air smelled strange, clean but with an odd metallic quality that burned his nostrils slightly. Movement in the corridor caught his eye. Tall beings walked past his cell. They had thin bodies with 4 arms and shiny skin that looked like beetle shells. Their heads had large compound eyes and moving parts around what must be mouths. They wore no clothes but had devices attached to their upper arms. "Aliens," Daniel said quietly. The word sounded ridiculous even as he said it, but there was no other explanation. He had been abducted by aliens. He examined his cell more carefully, about 15 feet square with nothing but the floor to sit on. The air came in through tiny holes near the ceiling. The clear wall seemed to be the only way in or out, but he could see no door or seam. In the cells across from him, he saw earth animals. A tiger paced in one. A black bear sat in another. A pack of wolves huddled together in a third. All the dangerous predators of Earth, collected like specimens. One of the insect-like aliens stopped in front of Daniel's cell. It made clicking and whistling sounds while looking at him. Another alien joined it, this one with darker coloring and more elaborate devices on its arms. They seemed to be talking about him. A small device near the ceiling of his cell activated. A robotic voice spoke in English. "Human specimen appears in adequate physical condition. Minimal damage during extraction procedure. Vital signs within. Expected parameters." Daniel approached the clear wall. "Who are you? Why am I here?" The aliens made more sounds. The translation came through after a short delay. "Specimen is displaying communication attempts. Note higher cognitive function compared to other Earth predators." Daniel pressed his hands against the clear barrier. "I'm not a specimen. My name is Daniel Kelly. I'm a wildlife conservationist." The aliens didn't respond to him directly. They continued their discussion while the translator relayed their words. "Ziktal, these humans are not impressive physical specimens. Their inclusion in the dangerous species collection is questionable." The darker-colored alien, presumably Ziktal, responded. "Krenvox, humans are the dominant species of their planet, despite their physical limitations. This suggests adaptive capacities worthy of study. Their primitive technology poses no threat to Varaxian interests. Their rate of technological development is concerning. Models predict significant advancement within just a few centuries. Daniel listened carefully. These aliens, Varaxians, were collecting dangerous species. They saw humans as potential threats despite their physical weakness, and they had others of his kind somewhere on this ship. "Where are the other humans you've taken?" Daniel asked loudly. The translation device picked up his question, but the aliens ignored it. They moved on, continuing down the corridor. For hours, Daniel observed everything he could see from his cell. Different aliens passed by, all with the same basic insect-like form but with variations in color and size. They all carried devices, and rarely looked directly at the specimens in their cells. Food arrived through a small opening in the floor, a gray paste that smelled like nothing. Daniel sniffed it carefully, then took a tiny taste. It had no flavor but didn't seem harmful. He ate it slowly, knowing he would need strength. Later, Zigtal returned with several other Varaxians. They studied Daniel with what seemed like greater interest. "The draconid specimens require regular live feeding," the translation device relayed. "Previous specimens were consumed too quickly. Human adaptive capabilities may provide more extended observation opportunities," Zigtal responded. "Their problem-solving abilities might create interesting interactions." A chill ran down Daniel's spine. They were talking about feeding him to something. "The Council has approved the transfer," another alien said. "Prepare the human for relocation to Habitat 7. Zigtal made a gesture with its upper arms. "This will be most informative. Humans have survived as a species through intelligence rather than physical strength. I'm curious how this specimen will respond to apex predators from another world." The clear wall of Daniel's cell suddenly fogged over. A sweet-smelling gas began to fill the room. Daniel held his breath and searched for any way out, but the gas worked quickly. His limbs grew heavy. His vision darkened at the edges. As consciousness slipped away, Daniel heard the final translation. "The draconids have been without food for 7 cycles. They will be most eager to meet their new cellmate." Daniel's last thought before darkness took him was simple. These aliens had made a serious mistake. They saw him as weak prey to be fed to monsters. What they didn't understand was that humans, especially humans like him, had been the most dangerous predators on Earth for thousands of years. They had put a fox in with wolves thinking the fox would die. They didn't realize that sometimes the fox was more dangerous than any wolf could ever be. Daniel woke to the feeling of warm air on his face. His head throbbed as he opened his eyes. He lay on soft dirt instead of the metal floor of his cell. Above him, a light source that looked like the sun shone through what seemed to be a sky, but something about it felt wrong. He blinked and focused. Too regular, too perfect. An artificial sky and a massive enclosed space. He sat up slowly, checking himself for injuries. His clothes were dirty but intact. His boots were still on his feet. The aliens had not taken anything from him except his small backpack. Even the knife strapped to his ankle was still there. They clearly did not see it as a threat. Another mistake. Daniel looked around. He was in a large space made to look like an outdoor area. Rocky hills rose to his left. A small lake with clear water lay to his right. Plants similar to Earth's grew everywhere, but with slight differences in color and shape. The air smelled fresh but had that same metallic quality he had noticed in his cell. The space was huge, maybe half a mile across in all directions. The walls curved up to form a dome overhead. The fake sun hung at the top. Daniel saw small devices placed throughout the habitat, cameras or sensors, he guessed. The aliens were watching. He stood up and scanned his surroundings more carefully. No obvious exit. No sign of the draconids the aliens had mentioned. He needed to find water, shelter, and something to use as a weapon beyond his small knife. Daniel walked to the lake and knelt by the edge. The water looked clean. He dipped his hand in and brought some to his lips. It tasted normal. He drank deeply, then splashed some on his face. A low rumbling sound came from behind a cluster of large rocks across the lake. Daniel froze, his muscles tensed, ready to run. The rumbling came again, louder this time. Something large was moving behind those rocks. Daniel backed away from the lake slowly. He needed higher ground and a better view. He turned toward the rocky hills and began moving quietly toward them. A shadow passed overhead. Something massive was flying above him. Daniel dropped to a crouch and looked up. His breath caught in his throat. A creature the size of a small airplane circled above. It had leathery wings that stretched at least 30 feet across. Its body was covered in blue scales that shimmered in the artificial light. A long neck ended in a horned head. A tail with spikes trailed behind it. A dragon, Daniel whispered in disbelief. They weren't kidding. The blue dragon circled lower, its eyes fixed on Daniel. Intelligent eyes. Predator eyes. But there was something more there, not just animal hunger. These were eyes that could think and plan. Daniel stood his ground. Running would trigger the chase instinct in any predator. He needed to show he wasn't easy prey. The dragon landed 50 feet away. The ground shook with its weight. Up close, it was even more impressive. Its head alone was the size of a car. Teeth like daggers lined its mouth. It folded its wings against its body and studied Daniel with those intelligent eyes. The pale insects bring us another morsel, the dragon said in a deep voice that Daniel could somehow understand. This one is smaller than usual. Daniel's mind raced. The dragon was speaking English. No, there must be translation devices in this habitat too, like in his cell. I'm not your food, Daniel said firmly, keeping his voice steady despite his racing heart. The dragon made a sound like rolling thunder. It took Daniel a moment to realize it was laughing. They all say that, the dragon replied. Yet all end up the same way. Movement to the left caught Daniel's eye. A second dragon emerged from behind the rocky hills. This one was red with black, spines running down its back, smaller than the blue one, but still massive. Seleth, are you talking with your food again? The red dragon called out. Its voice was higher but still powerful. The blue dragon, Seleth, turned its head. This one thinks it's different, Nixia. The red dragon, Nixia, came closer. They sent us a human this time. I've heard of their kind from the other prisoners before we ate them, supposedly the dominant species of their world. Hard to believe, Seleth said, turning back to Daniel. So fragile. No claws, no natural armor. Daniel stood tall. We don't need them. We have our minds. This made both dragons laugh. Fracas will find this one amusing, Nixia said. Where is he? By the hot springs, Seleth replied. Sleeping after his last meal. Daniel took a careful step back. I'm not looking for trouble. I was taken against my will just like you were. Both dragons stopped laughing. Seleth lowered his massive head to look more closely at Daniel. How do you know we were taken? The blue dragon asked. The aliens, the Varaxians. They're collecting dangerous species, Daniel explained. They have others from my world too. I saw them. They're studying us all like specimens in a zoo, Nixia hissed, smoke curling from her nostrils. The pale insects with their painful sticks and sleeping gas. Yes, we were rulers on our world before they came. A third dragon appeared, larger than the other two. Green scales with gold flecks covered its body, its horns curved majestically from its head. It moved with the confidence of a natural leader. What is this? The green dragon's voice boomed across the habitat. Why is our meal still standing? Vracus, Seleth said, bowing his head slightly. This human claims to be a prisoner like us. The green dragon Vracus came forward. He was truly massive, at least 60 feet from nose to tail. His eyes were golden and filled with ancient wisdom and cruelty. Of course it is a prisoner, Vracus said. All who enter this false world are prisoners. That doesn't mean it isn't also our food. Daniel met the great dragon's gaze. If we're all prisoners, shouldn't we be allies instead of enemies? Vracus laughed, a sound like mountains crumbling. And what alliance could a tiny creature like you offer to the Draconis Imperialis? We who ruled the skies and lands of a world far greater than your own? Information, Daniel said quickly. I've seen parts of the ship you haven't. I know things about the Varaxians, and I'm good at finding weaknesses." The three dragons exchanged looks. Daniel could see they were considering his words. "Prove your worth, human," Vrachus finally said. "Tell us something we don't know about our captors." Daniel thought quickly. "They think I'm going to die in here. They're watching us right now through devices hidden around this habitat. They're studying how you hunt and kill." Vrachus looked up at one of the small devices Daniel had noticed earlier. His eyes narrowed. "We know of their watching eyes," the green dragon said. "Is that all you offer?" "No," Daniel replied. "I also know they think of you as animals. They don't realize how intelligent you are. That's a weakness we can use." The dragons were silent for a long moment. Daniel held his breath. "You may live," Vrachus finally declared. "For now. But remember, human, in this place I am king. Cross me, and even your clever mind won't save you from my fire." As if to emphasize his point, Vrachus opened his mouth and released a jet of flame that scorched the ground just feet from where Daniel stood. The heat was intense enough to make Daniel step back. "I understand," Daniel said, his mind already working on a plan. The dragons were intelligent and powerful, but filled with pride. He could use that, and together they might have a chance against the Varaxians. From their observation room, Ziktal and the other Varaxians watched with surprise as the human survived its first encounter with the Draconids. "Most unexpected," Ziktal said. "Perhaps humans are more interesting specimens than we realized." 3 days passed in the habitat. Daniel had built himself a small shelter against the rocky hills using branches and leaves. It wasn't much, but it gave him a place to sleep where he could see anyone approaching. He never turned his back on the dragons for long. Food appeared twice a day through openings in the ground. For the dragons, large chunks of meat. For Daniel, the same tasteless gray paste he had in his cell. He ate it without complaint. He needed to keep up his strength. The dragons mostly ignored him. Vrachus spent much of his time on a large flat rock near the hot springs, basking in the artificial heat. Seleth patrolled the habitat from the air, sometimes disappearing into a large cave in the far wall. Nixia was the most curious about Daniel. She would watch him from a distance as he explored their prison. On the 4th day, Daniel approached Nixia as she drank from the lake. "Can I ask you something?" he said, keeping a respectful distance. Nixia lifted her head, water dripping from her scaled chin. "The human speaks. I wondered how long you would avoid us." "I wasn't avoiding you," Daniel said. "I was learning about this place." "And what have you learned?" she asked. Daniel pointed to various spots around the habitat. "There are 16 cameras that I can see. 4 hidden devices that look like they might be for sound. The wall has a different color in that section over there. Might be a door. And the food always comes at the same times from the same places." Nixia looked impressed despite herself. "You notice much for such a small creature." "Humans survive by paying attention," Daniel said. "May I ask about your world? Before the Varaxians took you?" The red dragon settled onto the ground, folding her wings. "Why do you want to know?" "Because understanding each other might help us find a way out of here," Daniel said simply. Nixia was quiet for a moment, then began to speak. "Our world has 3 moons and a red sun. We Draconis ruled the great mountains of the northern lands. Vrachus was a lord of the highest peak with many servants and treasures. I was a hunter for my clan. Seleth was a scholar, believe it or not." "A scholar?" Daniel asked, surprised. "Yes. Our kind values knowledge, as well as strength." Seleth studied the stars and the ancient magics of our ancestors. Daniel filed this information away. A dragon interested in knowledge might be his best ally. "How did the Varaxians capture you?" he asked. Nixia's eyes narrowed, smoke curling from her nostrils. "They came in floating ships that our fire could not burn. They used weapons that caused pain without wounds. Many of my kind fought. Many died. The 3 of us were taken from different places. We met here in this false world. Have you tried to escape?" "Of course," she snorted. Fracas tried to burn through the walls when we first arrived. The insects released a gas that made us weak. When we woke, they had put metal bands on our necks. She tilted her head to show a thin metal collar almost hidden by her scales. If we try to use our fire on the walls, the bands cause great pain. Daniel hadn't noticed the collars before. He looked more closely and saw that Nixia was right. Each dragon wore a thin metal band around their neck. "Do you know anything about the other prisoners?" he asked. "The ones in the other habitats?" "We hear roars and cries sometimes," Nixia said. "Through the walls, many different creatures speak in many different tongues. The insects have collected monsters from many worlds." Daniel nodded. "On my world, we have a saying. The enemy of my enemy is my friend." "A wise saying," came a deep voice from behind them. Daniel turned to see Selith approaching. The blue dragon had moved silently for such a large creature. "I have been listening," Selith said. "You ask interesting questions, human." "Call me Daniel," he said. "Daniel," Selith repeated, the name sounding strange in his rumbling voice. "You believe we can escape this prison?" "I believe it's possible," Daniel said carefully. "Every prison has weaknesses. But I need to understand more about our captors. And this place." Vracus appeared, walking slowly toward them. The other dragons made way for him. "The human thinks itself clever," the green dragon said, "but the pale insects have held us for many cycles. What can you do that we cannot?" Daniel looked up at the massive dragon without fear. "I can think like them. I can understand their technology. And I'm small enough to go places you can't." Vracus laughed. "And how would you do that when you are trapped in here with us?" "I need to examine one of those translation devices," Daniel said, pointing to a small object half hidden in a nearby tree. "If I can get to it, I might be able to use it." "The insects will stop you," Nixia said. "Not if you help me," Daniel replied. "They're watching us. They expect you to hunt me, to play with me like cats with a mouse. If you pretend to chase me toward that tree, I can grab the device while they think I'm just trying to escape." The dragons exchanged looks. Daniel could see they were considering his plan. "Why should we help you?" Vracus asked. "Because I can help you," Daniel answered. "Those collars they put on you, I might be able to remove them if I understand their technology better." This got their attention. Vracus's eyes narrowed. "If you lie—" "I don't lie," Daniel said firmly. "I want freedom as much as you do." After a long moment, Vracus nodded. "Very well, human. We will try your plan. But remember, if you betray us, your death will be slow." "I understand," Daniel said. They planned their move carefully. Nixia would begin the chase, driving Daniel toward the tree with the device. Selith would watch from the air to see how the Varaxians reacted. Vracus would create a distraction on the other side of the habitat. When everything was ready, they began. Nixia roared and charged at Daniel. He ran, his heart pounding, knowing that if she wanted to catch him, she easily could. He sprinted toward the tree, feeling the ground shake as the red dragon followed. Vracus bellowed and shot fire into the air on the far side of the habitat. Daniel saw several of the camera devices turn that way. Perfect. He reached the tree and scrambled up it as Nixia snapped at his heels. His hand closed around the small metal device. It was attached to the tree branch by a thin metal arm. Daniel pulled out his knife and quickly worked to detach it. The device came free just as Nixia reached the tree. She pretended to snap at the branches, missing him deliberately. Daniel stuffed the device into his pocket and climbed higher. From by the observation room, Zichtal watched with interest. "The human shows surprising agility and survival instinct," the alien noted. "The draconids appear to be toying with it rather than killing it outright. A hunting behavior we have not observed before," another Varaxian agreed. "This interaction provides valuable data." Neither noticed the missing translation device. That night, hidden in his shelter, Daniel examined his prize by the dim light of the artificial moon. The device was a marvel of technology, smaller than his thumb but complex inside. He carefully took it apart, using his knife as a tool. "I think I understand how it works," he whispered to Selith, who waited nearby. It doesn't just translate. It connects to the ship's computer system. With some modifications, I might be able to use it to access other systems. Selith's eyes gleamed in the darkness. Can you remove our collars? Not yet, Daniel admitted. But this is the first step. Tomorrow I need to get closer to the wall I think is a door. There might be a control panel nearby. The blue dragon nodded. We will help you, Daniel, but Vrakas grows impatient. He wants results. Tell him I'm working. As fast as I can, Daniel said. And tell him something else. The Varaxians think of him as an animal, a specimen. When we get out of here, he can show them just how wrong they are. Selith made a sound like distant thunder. Dragon laughter. I will tell him. Rest now, human. Tomorrow, we continue the hunt. As Daniel settled down to sleep, his mind raced, with plans. The Varaxians had made a crucial mistake. They had given him powerful allies, and soon, they would learn what happened when you cornered a human with nothing to lose. A week passed as Daniel worked on the translation device. Using his knife and small pieces of metal he had collected from the food delivery system, he carefully modified the tiny machine. The dragons kept the charade going, pretending to hunt him while actually protecting him. To the watching Varaxians, it seemed like the dragons were simply playing with their food, extending their entertainment. Daniel sat in a hidden spot behind some large rocks near the hot springs. Vrakas lay nearby, his massive body providing additional cover from the cameras. How much longer, human? The green dragon rumbled quietly. Almost done, Daniel replied, making a final adjustment to the device. There. Now we can test it. He held up the modified translator. It looked mostly the same, but Daniel had rewired its insides using his knowledge of electronics from his military days. If he was right, the device now could do more than translate. It could tap into the ship's communication system. What will it do? Vrakas asked. If I'm right, it will let us listen to the Varaxians without them knowing, Daniel explained. And maybe even send false signals to the cameras. Vrakas made a low sound of approval. Clever, like a thief in the night. Daniel activated the device. At first, nothing happened. Then, faint voices came through. The clicking and whistling sounds of the Varaxians, automatically translated into words they could understand, behavior patterns showing unexpected developments. The human survival duration exceeds all previous specimens. Ziegtal believes further observation will yield significant data. Daniel smiled grimly. It works. We can hear them. Vrakas's eyes narrowed. Can they hear us? No. I've disabled that function, Daniel assured him. Now we need to get to that section of wall I told you about. That evening, they put the next part of their plan into action. Nixia created a distraction by roaring and shooting fire into the air near the lake. While the cameras focused on her display, Daniel, with Selith providing cover, approached the wall section he had identified earlier. Up close, he could see he had been right. This section was different. A barely visible seam ran around a rectangular area about 10 feet high, a door disguised to blend with the habitat walls. There should be a control panel somewhere, Daniel whispered to Selith. The blue dragon sniffed the air. I smell the metal of their machines here, he said, pointing with one claw to a spot near the ground. Daniel examined the area and found a small panel hidden among fake rocks. Using his knife, he carefully pried it open to reveal a complex array of lights and symbols. Can you make it open? Selith asked. Not yet, Daniel said. I need to understand how it works first, but I can use our modified translator to learn the code. He held the device near the control panel. The translator began to pick up signals, displaying information about the door's security system. This door needs a specific code sequence, Daniel explained. And it's only used when they deliver the large food for you three. But now I know when they'll open it next, tomorrow morning. What good does that do us? Selith asked. We cannot escape when they bring food. They use the sleeping gas if we try. We're not going to escape then, Daniel said. We're going to watch and learn. The translator will record the code they use. Then we can open the door whenever we want." They returned to the others and shared what they had learned. Vrachus was pleased with their progress but still cautious. "Even if we open the door, the collars will stop us from leaving," the green dragon pointed out. "One problem at a time," Daniel said. "First we get the door code, then we figure out the collars." The next morning, they waited. As predicted, the hidden door slid open and Varaxian workers pushed in large carts of meat for the dragons. Daniel, hiding behind rocks with the translator, recorded everything. The door closed as quickly as it had opened. "Did you get it?" Nixia asked when the aliens had gone. Daniel checked the translator. "Yes, I have the code sequence now." Over the next 2 days, Daniel studied the collar on Selith's neck. The blue dragon had to lie very still as Daniel examined the device, careful not to trigger its pain mechanism. "It's connected to their main system," Daniel explained. "If you try to leave the habitat or use your fire on the walls, it activates. But it has a physical lock too, a backup in case the electronic system fails." "Can you open it?" Selith asked. "I think so. But I need something stronger than my knife." Nixia offered a solution. "My scales are sharper than most. When I shed, some remain hard enough to cut metal." She led Daniel to her sleeping area, where several shed scales lay scattered around. Daniel picked up the largest one, almost as long as his forearm, and with an edge like a razor. "This might work," he said. Using the scale as a tool, Daniel carefully worked on Selith's collar lock. It was delicate work, and one wrong move could trigger the pain mechanism. After an hour, he heard a click. "Got it," he whispered. The collar loosened but didn't fall off. "Don't remove it yet, we need to time this perfectly." He performed the same procedure on Nixia's collar, then Vrachus's. All three now had collars that could be removed when the time came. That night they gathered in Vrachus's cave to finalize their plan. "Tomorrow," Daniel said, "when the habitat lights dim for night cycle. The Varaxians have fewer watchers then." "How? Do you know this?" Vrachus asked. "I've been listening through the translator. They talk about shift changes. Their night watch is smaller." Through the translator, they had also learned more about the ship. It was huge, carrying specimens from dozens of worlds. Some were kept in habitats like theirs, others were in stasis chambers, and somewhere on the ship were more humans. "Once we're out, we need to move quickly and quietly," Daniel explained. "According to what I've heard, there's a section with smaller ships, what they call transport vessels. If we can reach one, we might be able to escape the main ship entirely." "And go where?" Nixia asked. "First we find the other humans," Daniel said. "Then we worry about getting home." Vrachus nodded slowly. "A good plan, human. You have proven your worth." The translator suddenly picked up new voices, Varaxians discussing something urgently. Energy fluctuations in Habitat 7. Possible malfunction in the Draconid containment systems. Send a maintenance team immediately. Daniel's heart raced. They've detected something. They're sending people to check the habitat. "We must move now," Vrachus decided. "The plan changes. We attack when they enter." "No," Daniel said firmly. "If we fight here, they'll lock down the whole ship. We stick to the plan but move it up. We leave now before they arrive." After a moment, Vrachus nodded. "Lead, human, we will follow." They moved quickly to the hidden door. Daniel used the translator to send the code sequence he had recorded. For a terrible moment, nothing happened. Then, with a soft hiss, the door slid open. "Now," Daniel whispered, "remove the collars and go." The dragons pulled off their collars and tossed them aside. One by one, they slipped through the door into a long corridor beyond. Daniel went last, the translator clutched in his hand, his knife ready. They had escaped their cell. But they were still deep inside the alien ship, surrounded by enemies who didn't yet know that the true monsters were now loose. In the observation room, alarms began to sound as the sensors registered the open door and the discarded collars. Ziktal stared at the monitors in disbelief. "Impossible," the lead researcher said. "The human has released the Draconids. Alert security. lock down all sections. But it was already too late. The hunt had begun, and this time the prey had become the predators. Alarms blared throughout the corridors of the Varaxian ship. Red lights flashed along the walls. Daniel and the three dragons moved as quickly and quietly as possible, which wasn't very quiet given the dragon's size. They had to hurry. Which way? Vracus asked, his voice low despite the noise of the alarms. Daniel held up the translator device, which was picking up Varaxian communications. They're sealing off sections of the ship. We need to go this way. He pointed down a side corridor. The translator shows a map of their security response. They turned down the corridor. It was barely large enough for Vracus to fit through. The green dragon had to pull in his wings tight against his body. They moved in single file, Nixia in front, then Daniel, then Seleth, with Vracus bringing up the rear. A door at the end of the corridor began to close automatically. "Run!" Daniel shouted. Nixia shot forward and jammed her body into the doorway. The metal door pressed against her scales but couldn't close completely. She roared in pain but held firm. "Hurry!" she growled as the others squeezed past her. Once they were through, she pulled herself forward with a final heave. The door slammed shut behind them. "Are you hurt?" Daniel asked, looking at the red dragons, side where the door had pressed against her. "My scales are tough," Nixia said, though Daniel could see she was in pain. "Where are we?" They were in a large chamber filled with containers. Some were small, like coffins. Others were massive, large enough to hold creatures bigger than even Vracus. "Stasis chambers," Daniel said, looking at the translator's readout. "They keep some specimens in suspended animation." Seleth moved among the containers, looking into the ones with transparent tops. So many creatures, from so many worlds. Daniel approached a group of smaller containers. His heart skipped a beat. When he looked inside one, a human woman lay inside, her chest barely moving, her eyes closed. In other containers nearby were more humans, men and women of different ages. "My people," he said quietly. "They're keeping them asleep." Vracus came to his side. "Can you wake them?" Daniel studied the control panel on the side of one container. "I think so, but not now. We need to move. According to the translator, security teams are heading this way." They continued through the stasis chamber, heading toward a large doorway on the far side. Through the translator, Daniel learned that their best hope was to reach the ship's docking bay where smaller vessels were kept. As they approached the doorway, it suddenly opened. A group of Varaxians rushed in, armed with long, rod-like weapons. They froze at the sight of the three dragons and the human. "Specimens loose," one cried through its communication device. "Need reinforcement." Nixia's fire cut off the rest of the message. The Varaxians scattered, their insect-like bodies quick and agile. They fired their weapons, which shot pulses of energy that made Daniel's skin burn when they passed close by. "These are the pain sticks they used to capture us," Seleth growled, dodging a blast. Vracus roared and charged forward, his massive bulk sending the aliens flying. His jaws closed around one Varaxian, ending its panicked clicks instantly. Daniel ducked behind a stasis container as energy pulses flew around him. He saw Nixia take a direct hit and stumble, crying out in pain. Seleth rushed to her side, shielding her with his wings. "We need to get through that door," Daniel shouted, pointing to the far exit. Vracus turned his attention to the remaining Varaxians who were retreating while still firing their weapons. With a deep breath, the green dragon released a stream of fire that filled the corridor behind them. The aliens' exoskeletons blackened and crumbled under the intense heat. When the path was clear, they moved forward again. Nixia limped, but insisted she could continue. They passed through several more corridors, encountering resistance twice more. Each time, the dragon's fire and physical power overwhelmed the Varaxian security forces. "The translator says the docking bay is just ahead," Daniel told them as they paused to rest in a large junction of corridors. "But it will be heavily guarded." "I am not afraid of their guards," Vracus said, his golden eyes gleaming with battle lust. "Let them come." "We need a plan," Daniel insisted. "Charging in will get us killed." He thought for a moment, then looked up at the ceiling. Pipes and conduits ran overhead, carrying power and life support throughout the ship. "Seleth, can you reach those pipes?" he asked. The blue dragon stretched upward. Yes. What do you want me to do? Tear them open. If I'm right, that will trigger emergency protocols. It might give us the distraction we need. Sealith reared up and slashed at the pipes with his claws. Liquid and gas sprayed out, and new alarms joined the chorus already sounding through the ship. The translator picked up frantic communications. Life support breach in Section 12, all personnel evacuate, emergency containment activating. Metal doors began to close automatically throughout the junction. Now, Daniel shouted. To the docking bay before they seal it off. They ran down the final corridor, pushing their tired bodies to the limit. Ahead they could see a massive open space filled with smaller ships of various sizes. Varaxians were rushing about, some evacuating due to the life support breach, others taking up defensive positions. There. Daniel pointed to a ship larger than the others. That one should be big enough for all of you. They charged into the docking bay. Fracas and Nixia laid down fire, creating a wall of flames that kept the Varaxians at bay. Selith grabbed Daniel in one claw and flew over the chaos, landing beside the ship Daniel had indicated. How do we open it? Selith asked, as Vracus and Nixia fought their way toward them. Daniel used the translator to send signals to the ship's entry hatch. With a hiss, it opened. Inside! Quickly! Selith went first, followed by Nixia. Vracus turned for one final attack, his fire catching several fuel canisters. The resulting explosion rocked the entire bay. The green dragon backed into the ship as Daniel worked the door controls from inside. The hatch closed just as Varaxian energy weapons began to hit the hull. Daniel rushed to the control room at the front of the ship. The panels were alien, but the translator helped him understand their functions. How do we fly this thing? Nixia asked, squeezing into the room behind him. I think I can figure it out, Daniel said, studying the controls. The basic principles should be similar to aircraft on Earth. Selith looked out the viewport. They are surrounding us. We must leave now. Daniel activated what he hoped were the engines. The ship hummed to life. Lights flashed across the control panels. Hold on, he said as he pressed what appeared to be the launch sequence. The ship lurched forward, breaking free from its docking clamps. Varaxians scattered as the vessel rose into the air. Through the viewport, they could see the massive hangar doors beginning to close. We won't make it, Nixia said, her voice tight with tension. Yes, we will, Daniel replied, pushing the engines to full power. The ship shot forward, scraping against the closing doors, but managing to slip through the narrowing gap. They were in space. The Varaxian research vessel grew smaller behind them as Daniel piloted their stolen ship away. We did it, Selith said in disbelief. We escaped. Vracus let out a rumbling laugh. The pale insects thought they were the hunters. They never understood what they had captured. Daniel set a course away from the alien ship, then turned to his dragon allies. We need to go back for the other humans, and then find a way home for all of us. We will help you free your people, Vracus said. You have earned our respect, Daniel. You may be small, but your mind is more dangerous than our fire. On my world, Daniel said with a grim smile, humans learned long ago that the most dangerous predator isn't the one with the biggest claws or teeth. It's the one that can think, plan, and adapt. Nixia nodded. The Varaxians made a mistake. Yes, Daniel agreed. They threw a human into a cell with dragons, thinking the dragons were the monsters. His eyes hardened as he looked back at the Varaxian ship, now just a dot in the distance. They forgot that humans can be the most monstrous of all. The stolen ship sped through the darkness of space, carrying its unlikely crew of allies. The Varaxians had wanted to study dangerous species. Instead, they had created something far more dangerous, a partnership between powerful creatures united by a common enemy. And leading them was a human who had proven that sometimes the most dangerous monster of all is the one that looks the least threatening. Because while dragons had fire and claws, humans had something far more lethal: the ability to turn anything and anyone into a weapon. Daniel smiled as he plotted their return to the Varaxian ship. The real hunt was just beginning.